The old cabin stood silent against the backdrop of a starless night. Its wooden frame, weathered by time and the elements, seemed to whisper secrets of the past. The moon, hidden behind thick clouds, cast no light, leaving the cabin shrouded in darkness. The only sound was the wind whistling through the ancient pines. It was a haunting melody, a symphony of nature that added to the eerie atmosphere. The trees, tall and imposing, swayed gently, their branches creaking like old bones. Inside, a fire crackled in the stone fireplace, casting flickering shadows on the faces of the 5 friends gathered around it. The warmth of the fire was a stark contrast to the cold, foreboding night outside. The flickering flames danced, creating an almost hypnotic effect. The air was thick with anticipation, a potent mix of excitement and trepidation. Each friend wore a different expression, some eager, some nervous, all aware that tonight was unlike any other. They were young, adventurous, and perhaps a little foolish. Their spirits were high, fueled by the thrill of the unknown and the promise of a story to tell. Tonight, they were tempting fate with a game that promised to blur the lines between reality and the supernatural. A game whispered in hushed tones around campfires and shared in the darkest corners of the internet. It was a game that had gained notoriety for its eerie rules and the chilling experiences of those who dared to play. Tonight they were playing the Midnight Game. The rules were simple yet terrifying. Summon the Midnight Man and avoid him at all costs until 3:33 a.m. Failure to do so could result in dire consequences. The cabin, nestled deep within the woods, had been in Jake's family for generations. It was a place of memories, both good and bad, a sanctuary from the outside world. Its isolation and eerie charm made it the perfect setting for their little adventure, or so they thought. The cabin's history was steeped in mystery, with tales of strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena. None of them truly believed in the stories, the warnings, the potential consequences of toying with forces unknown. They laughed off the tales as mere urban legends, the stuff of overactive imaginations. It was all a bit of fun, a way to test their courage and add a thrill to their weekend getaway. They were determined to prove their bravery, to show that they were not afraid of the dark or the unknown. They were about to discover that some games are best left unplayed. As the clock struck midnight, the atmosphere in the cabin shifted. The air grew colder, and an unsettling silence fell over the group. They were no longer just playing a game. They were part of something much more sinister.
Are you sure about this, guys? Maybe this isn't such a good idea.
Come on, Em, don't be a scaredy cat. It's just a game, a spooky story. What could possibly happen?
The others, a mix of bravado and apprehension on their faces, murmured in agreement. There was Ben, Jake's best friend, always up for a challenge. Sophie, Emily's best friend, trying to appear brave but her nervousness showing in her trembling hands. And finally, there was Ellie, the quiet observer of the group, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Ellie had a bad feeling about this, a knot of unease in her stomach that refused to be ignored, but she kept her doubts to herself, not wanting to appear cowardly. The rules of the Midnight Game were simple, deceptively so. A ritual to summon a supernatural entity, the Midnight Man. A game of hide-and-seek in the dark, with deadly consequences for those caught. Following the instructions they had found online, they gathered the necessary items: a candle, a piece of paper, a wooden door, a drop of their blood, and a single match. Each element held a specific significance, a way to open the door between their world and the realm of the Midnight Man. The candle represented the light of their world, the paper was a symbol of their identity, and the wooden door was the threshold they sought to cross. The drop of blood was a personal sacrifice. a token of their commitment, and the match was the spark that would ignite the ritual. The instructions were clear. Each of them had to write their full name on the piece of paper, prick their finger, and blot the paper with a drop of their blood. This act was not just a formality, it was a binding contract, a way to ensure that the Midnight Man would recognize and acknowledge each participant. The paper was then placed in front of the wooden door, which was to be the portal for the Midnight Man. This door, ordinary by day, would become a gateway to the unknown as the clock struck midnight. One by one they took their turn, the atmosphere growing heavier with each passing moment. The air was thick with anticipation and a hint of fear as each person completed their part of the ritual. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the final act that would set everything into motion.
Midnight Man, we call to thee. The words were whispered, almost lost in the stillness of the room, but their power was undeniable. Each syllable seemed to resonate, echoing in the minds of those present.
At precisely 12 a.m., Jake struck the match. The sound was sharp, breaking the silence like a crack of thunder. The sudden flare illuminated the faces around him, their expressions a mixture of fear and fascination. The flickering light cast eerie shadows, making the room seem even more otherworldly. He held the flame to the candle, the wick catching with a soft hiss. The small flame grew, pushing back the darkness and casting a warm golden glow. As the candlelight pushed back the darkness, Jake began to recite the incantation, his voice low and steady. The words flowed from him, a chant that seemed to come from deep within his soul. Each word was a step closer to the unknown, a call to the Midnight Man to cross the threshold and enter their world. The room was silent except for Jake's voice, the flickering candlelight the only movement. The ritual had begun, and there was no turning back. The first few minutes were met with an unsettling silence, the kind of silence that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, as if the very air around them was holding its breath. They huddled together, their earlier bravado fading into a nervous tension. The room, once filled with laughter and light-hearted banter, now felt like a trap, closing in on them with every passing second. The only sound was the crackling of the fire and the beating of their own hearts. Then the whispers began. At first they were so soft that they could have been mistaken for the wind rustling through the trees outside. Soft at first, barely audible. But as the seconds ticked by, the whispers grew louder, more distinct, as if they were coming from just behind them, just out of sight. They seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, slithering around them like living tendrils of fear. The shadows on the walls seemed to move of their own accord, twisting and contorting into grotesque shapes.
Did you hear that? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as the whispers grew louder, more insistent.
The whispers grew louder, more insistent, morphing into guttural voices that spoke their names, their deepest fears, their darkest secrets. Each word felt like a dagger, cutting deep into their souls. The air grew heavy, the pleasant scent of pine replaced by a cloying metallic odor. It was the smell of fear, of something ancient and malevolent. The candle flickered, casting grotesque shadows that danced on the walls. Each flicker seemed to bring the shadows to life, making them twist and writhe like dark, malevolent spirits. The temperature plummeted, a bone-chilling cold seeping into the room, seeping into their bones. Their breath became visible, each exhale a ghostly mist in the frigid air. A wave of dizziness washed over Ellie, and she stumbled, clutching at Sophie for support. Her vision blurred, and for a moment she thought she saw a dark figure standing in the corner of the room. This was no game. They had invited something sinister into their midst, something that fed on their fear, growing stronger with each passing moment, something ancient, evil, and hungry for their fear. The symbols on the walls seemed to glow with a dark energy, pulsing in time with their racing hearts. They knew deep down that they were no longer alone in the cabin. Something was watching them, waiting for the perfect moment to strike.